Oh no!
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Channel 23 and the Faces of Carlsbad. We're sponsored by Intrepid Potash, and we want to thank them for all their help. And this is a program, if you haven't seen us before, where we interview people that you might know. They might even be your neighbors. On the other hand, it might be that you've never seen them before, but when we're through, you're going to tell yourself as you sit back in your chair, I'd like to meet that lady or that gentleman. Of course, if you're a husband, we're interviewing all these beautiful women, I don't want you to lean back and tell your wife, I'd like to meet her.
Oh no!
So anyway, today I am very privileged to introduce to you a very lovely lady that I work with, Michelle McCutcheon.
Thank
Michelle,
you, Bob.
it's nice having you here.
Well, it's nice to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Well, what the audience does not know is that I've tried for 2 years to get you on TV, and you kept saying, no, I'm too busy. I don't want to. I'm too bashful. But I finally got you on. Aren't you?
I felt bad for you asking me and asking me and asking me because I couldn't imagine what I would have to say that anybody might be interested in. But anyway,
Well,
I agreed, Bob.
Yes, and I'm so proud of her. Well, anyway, Michelle, let's start back with your ancestors and tell us where they might have emigrated from.
My ancestors, mostly from England,
England.
Sweden, and Ireland. My maiden name is McDonald, so I'm Scotch-Irish.
Ah.
And I married a McCutcheon, and they were actually two different clans. Well, actually, they were the same clan, but they integrated into one. But I think we might have gone to war, and the McDonalds probably beat the McCutcheons. I'm not sure.
I heard that the McDonald's did in that they had a lot of warfare going on in those days.
Yeah.
And I heard the McDonald's won that thing, if it was a football score, it would be 14-7.
That might be true.
Yeah. So anyway.
That might be true.
But then your grandparents came over to the United States and settled. Is that correct?
I think my great grandparents. It's been many generations since they came over in the 1700s.
And
So
where did
it's
they
been a while.
settle when they came to the United States?
Well, some of them back east, and then a lot of them immigrated to the west. So I'm originally from Utah, from Salt Lake City. That's where I was born and raised and grew up. Was in Salt Lake City. My father's family settled in Idaho. In fact, in the Idaho Falls airport, my grandfather was a tile layer, and he was very, very talented. And in the concourse at the Idaho Falls airport is a huge mural made from tile, and it has the state seal on it, I believe. So if you're ever in Idaho Falls Airport, you can see that my grandfather did that huge mural out of tile. Little teeny tiny pieces, and he worked for a long time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that has to... Have you been up there a number of times just to see the tile?
I've been there a few times to see the tile, yeah.
Well, Salt Lake City, too, I've been there also, and it's a beautiful city.
Thank you. Most of my family is still there. They're scattered, but my parents are still there.
Yeah. Well, I was so impressed with the Mormon temple, and one of those they allow anybody to go into to sit.
Well, there's a visitor center. You have Temple Square, which is downtown Salt Lake City, and then in that Temple Square, which are of course several acres, then you have a visitor center and a tabernacle, which is where the Tabernacle Choir originally sang. And now they do it across the street at what they call the Conference Center, which seats about 26,000 people. Wow. And that's where the choir, they sing, but they also practice still in the tabernacle on Temple Square. And it was built in the 1800s, and it has wonderful acoustics. So if you were to be in the front of the tabernacle and you have someone sit in the back and you would drop just a little pin, a straight pin, you can hear that all the way in the back. The acoustics are beautiful there, and it's a dome-shaped building.
Yeah.
And for its time, the acoustics were something else, and it still is. So you can go in the tabernacle and in the visitor center, and then like the Mormon temples that are built throughout the world, before they're dedicated, anyone can go in and look and take a tour.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So you were brought up in the Mormon Church of the Latter-day Saints religion, right?
That's correct, and I still am. Yeah.
So we have a nice temple here in Carlsbad, don't we?
We do not. We don't. We have a church building.
Well, that's what we call it here, a church.
They have a ward house, which where we meet, and but the closest temple is in Lubbock. There's one in Lubbock, and also in Juarez and Albuquerque. So there's one in New Mexico, which is in Albuquerque.
So, what distinguishes the church from the temple? I mean, I'm a little lost on all of the history of everything.
You mean distinguishes the church from the temple? From the temple,
yes.
Well, there are certain things that you're married in the temple. They do baptisms in the temple. It's a sacred place to members of the LDS Church, and so and they're open during the week. We worship on Sundays in our ward houses. You have different congregations, and here in Carlsbad we have 2 different congregations that meet at different times, and so you worship there. But during the week, if you choose to go what we call do work in the temple, marriages and things like that, and we do that in the temple during the week, and they're open.
So your church here in Carlsbad, they don't have marriages going on in there, do they?
Well, you can. There are some people. There are bishops, what they call bishops here, and the bishops are ordained ministers, just like you would have a pastor or a priest in any other church.
I see.
And they do perform marriage ceremonies in the churches there. The LDS Church, we believe that families are forever and that they can be entered into a covenant where they are sealed forever. And so that's the term, families are forever. And those types of things occur in the temple.
Well, Latter-day Saints, Mormons, whatever you want to call them, they get along better among their families than some families in the country, I would assume.
Well, families are the central unit of society, and as they should be. And families are the central unit also in the church. And if the societies would follow like the teachings of the church where the families are central and everything, that there's a huge breakdown in families in society now, and which leads to economic problems, leads to crime and different things. And so we try as best we can to build up families and secure and make sure that those family relationships are secure between parents and children and grandparents. Grandparents were always very important to me growing up. It was important to me that I knew my grandparents and I knew their history. They taught me a lot, and I try to make sure that my children have a great relationship with their parents. It's good to know the children, to know where they came from and their history, the history of their ancestors, what they went through, just even if they fought for our country, or, we have a great heritage in
Yes,
this
but
country.
if you bring up the fact that you were a McDonald
Yes.
and your husband is a McCutcheon,
Yeah, it's a little bit of strife.
that's a little strife there, because the kids are going to say, well, I'm going to be on the McDonald side, or I'm going to be on the McCutcheon side.
Yeah, that can cause a little bit of strife, but we work through that.
Oh,
It's
good.
okay.
Well,
But families are they're very important to us.
Yeah.
And they are to most people in society, and it's up to us, you and me, to make sure that that the family stays strong, because it is the basic unit of society.
Oh, absolutely.
And when families break down, it is
Total
it's
chaos.
It's total
Total
chaos.
chaos.
And it's devastating for our country.
Now, what brought you to Carlsbad?
Well, my husband is actually from Carlsbad. He was born and raised here, and his father is from here, and he was born and raised here, and his father's mother and her sisters actually came here from, I believe it's Arkansas, and someone had tuberculosis. One of the sisters had tuberculosis, and they said this was a better climate for them, and so they immigrated here probably in the late 1800s, And so that's where his father's family's from. And so he was born and raised here, and he finished school at the University of Utah, which is where I met him at a dance.
Oh, University.
It was called a stomp back then. And he had cowboy boots on, and I'd never dated a cowboy before. But
oh, you had?
No, had not.
No. So he came in and threw that cowboy hat up in the air. And did you catch it?
He actually didn't have a cowboy hat on, but he probably did have the boots.
Oh,
and
okay.
Anyway, we went out a few times, and I think I found out it was his birthday, and I made him a cheesecake, and my mother said, "Oh, don't you make that boy a cheesecake. You'll end up marrying him and moving to New Mexico." And I said, "He's a cowboy, Mom, and he's from New Mexico." Anyway, and
all of a sudden,
here I am.
Oh, that cake must have hit the spot.
I think I make a good cheesecake, Bob.
Oh, now you tell me.
Yeah,
Huh?
now I tell you, I make a good cheesecake.
Okay. So anyway, when you got to Carlsbad, he went to work in what area again?
When we moved to Carlsbad, we'd been a few places. We had lived in Texas when we're in the oil field supply business.
Oh, I see.
And then we lived in Kermit, of all places. And so I went from living and growing up in Salt Lake City to moving to Kermit, Texas, to this part of the world, which was an interesting shock. But there are great people there.
Yeah.
And after that, we moved to Santa Fe, and he was the Secretary of Economic Development and Tourism for the state of New Mexico. He was Assistant Secretary of Economic Development and Tourism for the state, along with Nick Jenkins when he was the Secretary of Economic Development and Tourism. And we stayed in Santa Fe for about 1.5 years, and then we moved back to Carlsbad, and he went to work for Don Kidd at Western Commerce Bank.
You know, you mentioned two names there, Nick Jenkins and Don Kidd.
Yeah.
And I know both of them.
You do.
Yes,
I know you do.
Absolutely.
Good men.
Yes, they are.
Nick was actually one of the best men at our wedding, so my husband and Nick have been friends for a long time.
And Nick's brother?
Vance.
Yes.
Jody.
Vance, I'll never forget the time that he was in one of those Christmas programs. And he was a man on the stilts. And I got his autograph.
And you did?
Yes.
Did you frame it, Bob?
I
Vance
framed
would
it.
appreciate
yes,
that.
absolutely. You better believe
He
it.
did a great job. He did a great job.
And eventually, you started working for Nick at KCCC Radio, right?
I did. I started working for him. I've been there about 13 years. I first started with him doing advertisements on the radio, doing commercials, radio commercials, voice, I guess you could call them voiceovers, I guess.
Oh, yes. But
started doing that, and then the gal that worked for him that ran the office, she quit, and he asked me to come to work. And I had no interest in really having a full-time job, and so I told him, well, my youngest is in kindergarten, I can't. He said, well, and I said, she goes to school at 8:30. He said, well, come in after you take her to school. And I said, I pick her up at 3. Well, then you can leave the office at 3. Well, I go on all the field trips with my kids. You can do that. Well, I go home to visit my family 3 weeks in the summer. And he said, I don't care, just come to work. So that's the rest of the story is I went to work, and it's a wonderful job. He's great to work for.
Well, he's a wonderful guy to work for.
He sure is, because he puts up with me.
Well, his father gave me my start on radio many years
ago.
He did?
I didn't know you worked for Marion years ago.
When the station was up on
Mermont
Street. Yeah. He knew me through the school system somehow, and one day he asked if I would substitute for somebody, one of his announcers who couldn't make it, and I said, be glad to. So I did, and apparently he was pleased, and so I got my start up there.
I didn't know that it was that long ago.
A long time ago, and then when Nick opened up the news station on Canal Street, he asked if I'd like to come over there. I've been over there.
Boy,
yeah.
You're been there a lot longer than I have, Bob.
Yeah, but you're more efficient than I am.
Oh, I don't know about efficient. I don't know. I do know that you were a principal at Sunset, and I think...
No principal.
No, you were a teacher.
I was a teacher
at Sunset, yeah. And I think my husband was one of your students.
And he played baseball for me.
He played baseball for you.
That's right.
And Orrin Means as well.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I think it was a catcher. I have a few pictures. Not many, but I have a few.
Well, anyway, how many children do you have now?
We have 4 children. We have one son, and he has been living in Colorado, and he and his wife and their 2 children just moved back to Carlsbad
Oh my gosh.
about a month ago.
Yeah.
So they are here, and we have a daughter who has lived in Colorado, and she just moved back 2 days ago.
To Carlsbad?
To Carlsbad. She lives
Oh, I
in
bet that's
Carlsbad
a thrill
now,
for you, huh?
and they have 3 children. So my husband came to me the other day and he said, well, you went from 0 to 5 grandchildren all in the same town in 2 weeks. And I said, yes, we did. So they have 3 children, and then we have a daughter. She lives in Lubbock with her husband, and they have one little boy, a son, and
My
a
gosh, I
daughter.
can hardly believe that she's grown up and married.
Grown up and
Because
married.
I knew her when she was
Yeah,
tiny.
I know. She was tiny, that one. And then we
Yeah.
have Emily, and she's a senior in high school. So we have
You
4.
mean little Emily that I knew when she...
Little Emily is
Oh my
just about
gosh.
6 feet tall and beautiful girl.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, the children are all very, very good looking. They take after both mother and father.
well, you're
No.
sweet, Bob.
No,
Thank you.
that's the truth. And what do you do in your spare time when you have spare time? Because I know you have some very interesting background things.
Well, in my spare time, gosh, I love music. I love the piano. I enjoy singing. I do the choir. I direct the choir at church, and I love music. So it's one of my favorite things. And I do like to ride horses. I don't get, when we live on a ranch, so we live out of town, and I didn't grow up that way, so it's kind of a different way of life, something that you get used to and learn to love. And I love to ride, but usually when they gather cattle, I have to cook because nobody else will. So.
Well, in the past, you've told me that some exciting, dangerous things had happened out there on the ranch.
Oh, there are a few things. We've had a few broken bones, a few broken arms, and actually, my daughter was hunting. This has just been a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
and she bought a deer tag, and Stephen took her out, and this is the one that's a senior in high school, took her out to hunt, and they came back, and she walks in the door, and she's got a lot of blood running down her face. Well, she'd got the deer, but the gun kicked, and the scope went back and slashed her forehead open, so we got that taken care of. So that was just a day or 2 ago. We've had a few broken arms, a few interesting rattlesnakes out there too. Something you have to get used to.
Do you run into many rattlesnakes?
We've run into a few, and I have my mother-in-law. We built her a little house out there, and she passed away a couple of years ago. But she, when she was about 85 years old, I think we had one of the telephone repairmen had come out there to work, and he found a rattlesnake in her backyard, and he started screaming and ran into the front, and she said, well, go and kill it, and he wouldn't get near it. So she took the hoe, and she's 85. He was about 25 years old, so she took the hoe and went out there and got rid of that rattlesnake while he watched on.
Brave man, right?
Yes, he was very brave.
Oh, boy.
So we had interesting experiences.
I can't kill them. I ran into a small one time, and I just picked him. I didn't pick him up, but I got a stick and picked him up and put him out where he could get away, because he was in an area where he wasn't supposed to be.
Yes.
But I just hate hurting animals.
Well, I do have, well, and that is hard. I really can't do it, but I have somebody else do it. Because when they're on your front porch and you have little grandbabies there,
whoa, we
just don't have much of a choice.
No, you don't.
Just a few, this has been about a month or so ago, and my husband was on his way outside to do something. It was nighttime, and I said, you better take a flashlight because the snakes are out. And he opened the front door, and I've never heard anything like that in my life. He was coiled up right on the front door. Anyway, that took a little bit to get that taken care of.
Ooh, wow.
He almost stepped on it, but I said, you've got to take a flashlight.
So that's dangerous country out there.
Oh, yeah, we live in dangerous country. It's like the wild, wild west out there, I'm telling you.
It's like the wild, wild west.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll be
One of
darned.
my favorite things, though, Bob, to do is to, well, actually, I can't say it's one of my favorite things, but something that I learned to do was, or actually tried once, was to pregnancy test cows. I don't even know if I want to tell you how you do that.
So you test to see if the cow's going to have calves?
Yes, and you hire, people do that for a living. Actually, it was Nancy and Lee Watts that had come over to do that. And as they're sending the cows down the chute, and you put a glove on, you know, all the way from your hand all the way up to your shoulder, and then you go in, and you can imagine, and you can actually feel, and they can feel the limbs of the calf, and they can, you know, tell how far along the cow is. Yeah. So they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, not on your life. Well, when they asked every single man around there if he would do it, and they all said no, I said, well, then I'm going to do this. And show up all those men. And so I turned to Nancy and I said, I'm not really sure I can do this. She said, oh, you can, and it's kind of neat. Yeah. So she gloved me up, and then I said, but what if I get squirted? And they said, in all the times that we've done this, we have never been squirted by a cow. Never once. So I did the initiating, yeah. All over my sunglasses. They couldn't stand up. They were laughing so hard. And all my sister said was, Mom, we need to bring her home.
Back to Utah?
Back to Utah. Back to civilization. Actually, it was actually quite fascinating because you could go and you could feel I could feel the legs of the calf. And
my
it was very
goodness.
interesting.
Yeah,
but she did leave me with a gift.
Well, that's the way it goes sometimes. You can't always win.
Yeah, that's right. So that's interesting on the ranch.
Well, you know, my partner, Guy Lutman, he's a cowboy down there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He has one of those big cowboy hats, and you should see him get on a horse. I mean, remember Roy Rogers and Gene Autry?
Well, I've seen reruns.
Yeah. He looks just like those two guys getting on that horse. I tell you, it's something
Did he have a rope and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Oh. That is awesome. You know, he could come out to the ranch and teach us a thing or two out there.
I know he could. If you just give him a chance, and he'd be glad to do it. He's that type of guy. So anyway, do you read any good books, or are you so tired at night when you don't?
You know, I love to read, Bob, and I love to read ebooks, and I know that you don't, that you like to have a book in your hand.
Right.
But, you know, I love to go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon and click and have the book right there. And I used to be able to read a lot, but now, at night, I'll lay down for a moment and start to read, and I fall asleep. I guess I'm so busy. Well,
you are. I'm
very tired when I go to bed at night.
That's right.
I love to read.
That's good.
I love to read. What do you like to read?
I like to read mysteries.
Do you?
History.
And do you like Louis L'Amour?
Yes.
My grandfather, he loved Louis L'Amour.
Yes.
Those are I think I have some of his books.
And speaking of Mr. L'Amour, you know I love crypto quotes. I break codes.
It was not kryptonite. I said it was crypto quotes. Okay.
No, that's a poison. Anyway, no, and the other day they had one of his quotes in there.
Oh, yeah. They did.
So that was very interesting, I thought. Anyway, Michelle, I want to thank you for being our guest today. It really made me feel good because it took me 2.5 years.
I just guess I felt sorry for you, Bob, for begging me. I can't imagine why you would want me to come, but
well, I think,
thank you for begging me.
I think what did you in was last week when I asked you again and you said no thank you, and I started crying.
Oh, that must have been it.
That's what caused.
I have a soft heart.
You have a soft
Yes, I do. I felt bad for you.
Well, Michelle, tell Steve and all the kids I send my love.
I will.
So
it's been a pleasure, Bob.
Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Channel 23 and Intrepid Potash, goodbye and good luck. Well, anyway, we get to